triangles. First of all, we're going to put our oven on to heat up, turn it on at the wall, press the middle button underneath the display, and then turn the oven dial round to 5 if you're working on the gas, 180 if you're on the electric. Okay, just leave that on to heat up. We're also going to prepare our tin, our baking tray, by cutting a sheet of greaseproof paper or baking paper, non-stick paper to the size of our baking tray. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is prepare our filling. So we're going to take a small onion and cut it in half. So we're cutting it in half down the middle of the root. Okay, we're going to pop one side over there, and then this is the way around it grows in the ground. Roots down, this bit grows at the top, so we're going to cut the top off and then peel away all of the brown skin. Sometimes it's 1 layer, sometimes it's 2, sometimes 3. But all of the dry bits need to come off and just pop them to one side. Then we're going to slice our onion with our sharp knife, just cutting down the lines of the onion, leaving the root on. Using a claw hold, keeping your fingers behind the knife, switching over to a bridge. And then if we cut it this way, we could dice it, but I'm going to keep it sliced, cut the root off, and then it all breaks up into these slices here. So just pop that on one side of the board, and then we're going to prepare our cheese. So we want 50 grams of cheese, which I'm going to estimate is about that much there. We'll just weigh it to check it though. With the filling, it's not crucial that it's exactly 50 grams. With some, like the pastry, it is really important. So we're going to turn the scales on. You notice it comes up 0. If I'm going to measure it into my bowl though, I need to on off 0 and make sure it's on 0 and grams before I start. If it's not on grams, you just press the unit button until it says 0 and G. Let's weigh the cheese. 49 grams, that's close enough for me. Back to the board, and you're going to use this side of your grater to grate the cheese onto the board. So you've got your onion and your cheese ready for your filling. Okay, so now I'm going to make the pastry. So I'm making sure that my scales are on 0 grams again, and I'm going to measure out 100 grams of plain flour. I do want this to be accurate, so I'm going to make sure that that is exactly right. There we go. And it's plain flour because it's short crust pastry. We don't want too high a gluten content. So we're going to place that into our bowl. We can sieve it in if you want to make it a bit lighter. Sieving just helps to add a bit of extra air into the mixture. I'm putting it into a glass bowl here, but you'll put it into your large plastic bowl. I'm just doing glass because you can see it more easily. You might need to just help the last bits through. And then I'm going to add my butter. Now it needs to be a hard butter or margarine, the type that you get in a packet like this, not the type that you get in a plastic tub that's soft. It has to be a hard fat. And we want 50 grams of this. It's always half the amount of fat to flour. So I've got 100 grams of flour, I need 50 grams of fat. I'm going to measure that out. Okay, that's exactly right. So I'm going to place that into my bowl. I can just either cut it up with my table knife to make the pieces a little bit smaller, to start off with. And then I'm going to rub this fat in with my fingertips. Now, if you have warm hands, your hands are very likely to melt the fat, and that's not what we're aiming for. We want to handle this as little as possible, and we're coating the flour with the fat in the butter, and it stops the water absorbing into the flour and developing gluten, and that's what keeps the pastry nice and short, which means that it's crispy and it breaks easily, as opposed to the opposite, which would be stretchy and glutinous, like a bread dough. So we're aiming to keep rubbing this in until all the lumps of butter have disappeared and we're left with breadcrumbs. Okay, so I've got my breadcrumbs now. I've given my bowl a shake. Any lumps that are still in there will generally come to the top, so you can just break those up further. What we're aiming to do now is to bring this together into a dough. And we'll need to use 2 to 3 tablespoons of water. This is just cold tap water. I'm going to put 2 spoonfuls in as a starting point, and then take my metal spoon and stir it all together. We don't want it to be too wet. If it's too wet, it's going to go sticky, it's going to stick to the work surface, it's going to be difficult to work with. But if it's too dry, the dough's not going to come together and it will break apart. That 2 tablespoons is plenty enough. It's coming into a dough beautifully there. So I'm going to transfer that onto the work surface now. Because it's a pastry, we don't need to knead it. If we need a bit of extra flour on the work surface to stop it sticking, then we can have some. I'll put a little pile there. I'm just going to work the mixture just to get it all to come together. And then I'm going to make this into a square on my desk. Okay. A little bit of flour on the rolling pin, making sure it's not sticking. If you start with a square, you're more likely to end up with a square, and that's what we're aiming for. So taking my floured rolling pin, I'm now going to roll my pastry out. I'm using an equal pressure on both hands. Now I'm going to lift it up, get a bit more of that flour underneath, a bit more on the rolling pin, and roll it the other way. So I'm aiming to make a square with my pastry, as close to a square as I can. Just checking each time I go that I'm not sticking it down onto the work surface. Okay. So this is fine. What I'm going to do next is to take my knife and I'm going to cut this pastry into 4 quarters. And I'm going to take my egg, crack it with the end of my metal fork, and then pull the 2 sides of the shell apart over the bowl and empty the egg out into the bowl. And then I'm going to just beat together the yolk and the white and get rid of the shell. This is going to be the glue that sticks the sides of the pasty together, the triangles together. So using my pastry brush, I'm going to brush all of the edges that are on either the cut edge or around the edge of the pasty. All 4 of those. And then I'm going to put the cheese filling on the inside of these 4 quarters. Here's my cheese mixture. I'm just going to mix together the cheese and the onion. It's all mixed together. And split it into 4. In the 4 quarters, like this. Once you've filled them all, make sure that none of the mixture is too close to the edge, and then we're just going to fold the edge over like this. It's quite delicate, and then seal the edges just by pressing them down with our fingers. Okay, so if we do this one as well, over, press the edges. If you've got too much mixture, you can remove some, and then pinch it together. If you get any breakage, you can just seal it back up. It's quite warm in here, so it's melting a little bit. And then when you pick them up, just make sure they're sealed nicely. Place them onto the tray. And then you're going to brush the top of each of them with some of the beaten egg before placing into the oven. So I've got all four of them on the tray now. I've neatened up the edges on some of them so they look a little bit neater later on. And I'm going to place those in the oven. They should take about 20 minutes. I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. And after the 15 minutes, we'll have a look and see how they are looking. Okay, so the 15-minute timer went off. I've left them in for about another 5 minutes. And when I look into the oven, I can see that they're a beautiful golden brown colour, so they're ready to come out. So this is after 20 minutes of cooking time on a gas mark 5. Cheese and onion triangles. Enjoy.